Mercedes-Benz cars, Mercedes-Benz vans, and Mercedes EQ.
The only Muslim-owned Mercedes-Benz dealership in Johannesburg.
The US State Department has published a damning report which accuses the South African government of several human rights abuses. The executive summary to the US report on South Africa went as far as stating that the human rights situation in South Africa has worsened significantly. In its reaction, the South African government has rejected the report as an inaccurate and deeply flawed account of human rights practices in the country. Joining us now, we've got spokesperson for the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, and that is Chrispin Phiri. Chrispin, a very good morning to you. Welcome. Chrispin, can you hear me? Good morning and welcome.
It seems as though I'm struggling to hear you on your side. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me now?
I can, yeah. Can you hear me?
Right. So, yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Why is it that you
fantastic.
reject this report by the US government? What's flawed about it?
Well, there are a number of things that are flawed about it. But for example, it characterizes the killing of the two women in Limpopo by a farmer who subsequently fed these women to pigs, and it's alleged. This individual is currently before the court of law. It classifies that or characterizes that killing as an extrajudicial killing. Now, anyone with the semblance of logic would tell you that an extrajudicial killing is not a citizen committing a crime against another citizen. It's something completely different. It's law enforcement agencies not complying with, in our case, Section 49 of the Criminal Procedure Act. So that is one mischaracterization completely. Two, it says that the Expropriation Act that has been passed and is currently before the Constitutional Court as well is a violation of human rights. And the Expropriation Act is quite clear that it limits itself to a very specific set of instances where land can be expropriated without compensation. And moreover, the United Nations Human Rights Council has explicitly said that the Land Expropriation Act or the Expropriation Act is a just legislation and is a legislation in the right direction to deal with land racial inequality in South Africa. So really, this report at best is a collation of media reports. It distorts those media reports, it mischaracterizes South Africa's legislation, and it really leaves much to be desired.
You've mentioned what the report is at best. At worst, what is your thought? I mean, is this now politically motivated? Is this to create a justification for the Trump presidency and the Trump presidency's approach to South Africa, and the allegations have been made by certain entities from within our borders?
Well, I'm struggling to hear you when your video comes on, but at worst, I would say, as I understand your question, the report really portrays the US as a country that's a paragon of human rights, which is not necessarily true. In our instance, as South Africa, we know of an instance where a South African was shot and killed by law enforcement agencies, despite the fact that he was unarmed and not harming anyone in this situation. And this is the case of Linda Myeni, which I believe is still before the US courts. And in that instance, we didn't say this was an extrajudicial killing. We said that we respect the rights of the US law enforcement agencies to investigate the matter and bring a final answer on the issue. We also know, and this is common cause, there are great debates in the US currently as we speak, contemporary debates around how ICE is violating human rights of refugees, homeless people, etc. But we don't believe that it's for us to point these out. We do believe that a body like the Human Rights Council of the UN is better placed to really enforce a peer review system where we can collectively discuss human rights violations across the world and how we can address these issues as sovereign nation states. So it is also worth noting that the United Nations has actually pulled out of the Human Rights Council. So, it then becomes questionable if one country can assume the position of being the world's arbiter on human rights.
Crispin, can you hear me now? Just before I proceed on my next
Yes,
question.
I can hear you. I can hear you perfectly when your video is not
Okay.
on, interestingly. Yeah.
So, on a related matter, right? Yesterday, Corne Mulder, the politician, criticized the South African government and the ruling party based on a headline. This was now on X, and the headline was Iran South Africa military commanders hail common anti-oppression goals. And I'll read out to you his tweet quickly. He says, does the ANC really think that they can negotiate better tariff terms for South Africa with the US with this approach? Further isolation will not assist all our people to find jobs and get the economy to grow. And then well-known journalist Max du Preez kind of agreed with him and said, I'm afraid Corne has a point. Iran is an odious, cruel dictatorship. Parading South Africa's so-called friendship with Iran is in no way in our national interest. Will this so-called parading of South Africa's friendship with Iran further complicate its relationship with the US, in your opinion, as Corne and Max seem to be suggesting?
Well, it does serve to characterize our relations with Iran. South Africa is a sovereign state. We have bilateral relations with Iran, and that is something we do not make any bones about. But we must say that that visit by the general is something that has caused some disconcertion, because there are remarks that are attributed to the general which give the impression that he had a political mandate during that visit. And the articulation of South Africa's foreign policy is limited to DIRCO and the presidency. It's the policy is set by the presidency, and DIRCO supports that. So that is something that we would like to clarify. And as we speak, Minister Lamula will be engaging his counterparts and various other actors to understand what had transpired there and how is it that the general found himself making political statements, or at least we see that political statements are attributed to the general. And of course, you would accept in a democratic dispensation, generals are limited to military matters and not political overtures. That is the role of DIRCO. So that's something that we would be taking up further. But it's important to say that with regards to the tariffs regime, I mean, we are really seeing a scale of intransparent communication and unpredictability. There are countries who have gotten way higher tariffs than us, who have a neutral foreign policy, so they are not known to be non-aligned or even aligned to any other country. There are countries who are getting tariffs for their own judicial matters in their own countries. There are countries who are known to be allies of the USA who are getting high tariffs because of who they choose to trade with. So Corne Mulder and Mr. du Preez, when they analyze the current tariff discussions, would have to take that into consideration in their analysis.
All right, Crispin, thank you so much for your time and for chatting to us. Always appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day and go well. That was Chrispin Phiri, his spokesperson for the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, talking to us about that US report about alleged human rights abuses in South Africa and the deteriorating situation that they claim is a reality, and the government doesn't agree with that. Also, the issue around South Africa's relationship with Iran and whether it will further complicate the negotiation with the US in as far as the recent round of ding-dong with Donald Trump and various countries is concerned as far as an increase in tariffs goes.